My mother-in-law stole $38,000 that I spent 2 years saving to save my husband's life, but the truth I uncovered turned my world upside down. You won't believe how this story unfolds, and I promise you won't be able to look away until the very last minute. I stood in the hallway of our cozy apartment in suburban Chicago, helping my mother-in-law, Evelyn, button up her elegant burgundy wool coat. Outside, a cold autumn rain drizzled, and the scent of wet leaves slipped through the slightly open window, mingling with the lingering aroma of my apple pie. Evelyn, at 72, looked like she'd just stepped out of a salon. Her silver hair neatly pinned into a low bun, light makeup accentuating her sharp blue eyes, and a brooch. A delicate gold branch with tiny emeralds glimmering on her coat's lapel under the chandelier's glow. Her late husband, Richard, had given her that brooch for their silver anniversary, and she wore it like a talisman. I always envied that brooch. Not for its value, though it was clearly worth a fortune, but for the love story it held. Evelyn and Richard had been together for 35 years. Dancing to Elvis Presley at high school proms, making plans under the starry Wisconsin sky on the roof of Richard's old pickup, raising 2 sons in a little house with a white picket fence and rose bushes. Their love was the kind you see in movies, while I, a girl who grew up in an Iowa orphanage, could only dream of such a story. "Thanks for dinner, Christina," Evelyn said, adjusting her coat's collar and giving me a quick once-over. "It was nice." Her words hung in the air like a chilly breeze that cuts to the bone. I knew that tone. Behind her nice was a laundry list of critiques she'd never voice outright, but made clear with every glance, every sigh. My chicken pot pie with its flaky crust, which I'd slaved over for 3 hours, was probably too dry. The Caesar salad I'd made from a food blog recipe surely didn't measure up to her late mother Marcy's standards, whose cooking Evelyn recalled with reverence. And the corn and bacon chowder? I bet she was mentally comparing it to the one served at their family Thanksgiving in Milwaukee 40 years ago. Evelyn was a master of these subtle jabs, sharp, almost invisible, but each one hit its mark. I felt like I was back in school, taking a test I could never ace. I swallowed my hurt, as I had for the 15 years of my marriage to Jake. At 38, I still felt like that 6-year-old girl in the orphanage, desperately trying to earn the love of foster families. Back then, I'd sometimes be taken for trial weekends by families considering adoption. I'd wash dishes without being asked, thank them for every slice of bread, and try to be as quiet as a mouse. I smiled even when fear twisted my insides, terrified they'd send me back. And they always did. "Outsider," the other kids at the orphanage whispered, and that word branded itself into my skin. I thought marrying Jake would change everything. He was kind, funny, with warm brown eyes and a habit of humming old rock ballads from Nirvana to Bon Jovi while brewing morning coffee. But every time Evelyn gave me that condescending smile, I was that little girl again, unworthy of a seat at the family table. "Jake, walk your mom to her car," I called toward the living room, where my husband was watching football, sipping a beer. His beloved Chicago Bears were losing again, and he seemed too engrossed in the game to notice the strain in my voice. The TV blared, "Touchdown!" but Jake just scowled at the screen. Evelyn suddenly smiled. But it wasn't her usual smile. Warm, but slightly smug. There was something off about it. Sly. Like she knew a secret I didn't. Her eyes glinted, and for a moment I thought she was looking at me with triumph, like a chess player who'd just made a checkmate move. My stomach knotted. Something was wrong. "No need, dear. I'll manage, she said, her voice too sweet, almost theatrical. She adjusted her leather purse on her shoulder, and I noticed her fingers brush the brooch, as if checking it was still there. Evelyn stepped out the door, leaving a faint trail of lavender perfume, while I stood frozen in the hallway, tugging at my earlobe, an old nervous habit. In the orphanage, I'd done that before every serious talk with the headmistress when I was called to her office. It usually meant I'd done something wrong, forgotten to make my bed, lingered too long with a book instead of helping with chores, but most often, it was about why another family had passed on me. You're a good girl, Christina, but they need someone else, the headmistress would say, avoiding my eyes. I learned to read between the lines. I wasn't good enough. And now, Evelyn's smile, it was like those talks. It screamed, "You're an outsider." I tried to shake it off, but the feeling lodged in my chest like a splinter. I walked into the living room. Jake was still glued to the TV, but his face was paler than usual. He smelled of his usual sandalwood cologne, but now there was a faint, bitter medicinal scent mixed in. Over the past few months, he'd changed. Quieter. Slower. I noticed how he winced when getting up from the couch, how he'd pause, pressing a hand to his chest, thinking I wasn't watching. New pill bottles appeared on his nightstand, expensive ones he bought himself and hid in the back of the medicine cabinet. He thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. I'm a trauma surgeon at Northwestern Memorial Hospital's ER. I saw how he struggled to catch his breath after walking our golden retriever, Max. How he avoided stairs, taking the elevator even to the second floor. How he'd sit in the car after work, as if gathering strength before coming inside. "Everything go okay? Mom happy?" Jake asked, pulling me into a hug. His arms were warm, but I felt his tension. His t-shirt smelled faintly of sweat. He always sweated when nervous. "Yeah, fine," I lied, leaning into him. But Evelyn's strange smile gnawed at me. What did it mean? Why did I feel like I'd missed something crucial? I wanted to ask Jake, but he was already back to the TV, where the commentator was yelling about another Bears fumble. I swallowed my questions and went to wash dishes, trying to distract myself. But inside, I was boiling. The next morning, my phone woke me. I reached for it on the nightstand charger. The screen flashed, Sophia, my stepdaughter from Jake's first marriage, a 22-year-old college grad studying graphic design in Minnesota. Her voice trembled with excitement, like she'd just won the lottery. "Christina, you won't believe this," she started, skipping pleasantries. "Grandma's planning a Caribbean cruise. Says it's her lifelong dream. She's already picked the tour, Barbados, Jamaica, all-inclusive, 5-star ship, pools, live music, cocktails by the deck. She showed me the brochure. Palm trees, turquoise water, the works. But the trip costs like my entire year's salary. I'm floored." My blood ran cold. The Caribbean? Where did Evelyn get that kind of money? She lived on a pension and modest savings scraped together over years. Her house in suburban Milwaukee, a 1970s ranch with worn hardwood floors, faded floral wallpaper, and a creaky porch, was cozy but far from lavish. She always complained her pension barely covered utilities, meds, and gas for her old Ford Taurus. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. "Sophia, did she say where the money came from?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my insides churned. "Nope. Dad mumbled something about a gift yesterday. You know anything about it?" Sophia sounded intrigued but carefree, like she was gossiping about a Netflix show. I hung up slowly. "A gift?" that smile from Evelyn. A lump formed in my throat, like when I was a kid in the orphanage and my few treasures went missing. A photo of my parents I kept under my pillow, a butterfly hairpin from a foster mom, a tattered copy of Cinderella I read to dream of a better life. There was always someone who thought an orphan didn't deserve to have anything. And now, this, my savings, my stash. I rushed to the bedroom, heart pounding like I'd run a marathon. On the top shelf of the closet, behind boxes of Christmas decorations, strings of lights, glass ornaments, Santa figurines, and old photo albums, I hid a heart-shaped cookie tin. Inside were $38,000 saved over 2 years. I'd denied myself everything. No new winter coat, though my old parka was fraying at the elbows. I took the bus to work instead of Uber, even in blizzards when the wind cut through me. I cooked cheap meals, mac and cheese, canned beans, discount chicken wings. Every $50 in that tin was a sacrifice. No dinners with friends at trendy Chicago restaurants. No tickets to Hamilton. No vacation to Lake Michigan that Jake and I never took. Those dollars were for him. For a heart surgery he didn't even know he needed. I knew his condition was worsening. I saw the signs. Shortness of breath after walking max. Exhaustion after a day at his insurance office job. Chest pains he tried to hide. I researched at night while he slept. The best cardiac clinics in Chicago, surgery costs, doctor reviews, and I saved to save him. I opened the tin. Empty. The world tilted. My legs buckled, and the tin slipped from my hands, clattering across the hardwood floor, knocking over a box of ornaments. A red one with gold glitter shattered, its pieces scattering like my hopes. $38,000. 2 years of my life. Gone. And that smile from Evelyn. She knew. She found my stash, took the money, and left to plan her cruise, leaving me with nothing but a broken heart. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the Christmas boxes I'd knocked over in my panic. My hands shook, and memories from the orphanage flooded back. I was 8, clutching a small wooden box I'd made in craft class, carved with a flower on the lid. Inside, I kept my treasures. A faded photo of my parents, whom I barely remembered, and a beaded bracelet from a foster mom. One night, I woke to rustling. Melissa, an older girl who always sneered at me, was rifling through my things. I pretended to sleep, too scared to move. By morning, the box was empty. I ran to the headmistress, but she just shrugged. "Things disappear in the orphanage, Christina. Be more careful." I cried in the bathroom, hiding so no one would see. Now, nearly 30 years later, I felt the same. Betrayed, helpless, an outsider. I stood, wiped my tears, and looked in the mirror. My eyes were red, my hair a mess, my braid unraveling. "You're not in the orphanage, Christina," I told my reflection. "You're an adult. A doctor. You can figure this out." But inside, I was still that little girl, terrified she'd never be loved. The day dragged on in a fog. At the hospital, I treated patients on autopilot, stitched up a guy who crashed his bike, reviewed x-rays for a woman with a broken wrist, said the right words, but my mind screamed, "Evelyn stole my money!" Colleagues noticed something was off. "You okay, Christina?" asked Linda, a nurse, when I dropped a patient file for the 3rd time. I nodded, but my face probably betrayed me. In the break room mirror, I saw myself. Pale, dark circles under my eyes, braid falling apart. I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. After my shift, I met my friend Emily, a nurse from the hospital, at the coffee shop across the street. Emily was my lifeline, always ready with stories about disastrous Tinder dates or her cat trashing her apartment. But today, I couldn't muster a smile. We sat by the window, and I spilled everything. The missing money, Evelyn's smile, my suspicions. Outside, rain streaked the glass like tears. "Christina, are you serious?" Emily set down her latte, her green eyes wide with shock. "You think your mother-in-law stole 38 grand? That's straight out of a soap opera, like Dynasty or Days of Our Lives." "I don't know what to think," I admitted, shredding a paper napkin into bits. "She's always looked at me like I don't belong. And now this. I saved that money for Jake. He's sick, Emily. Heart problems, and he doesn't even know. I wanted to handle it quietly so he wouldn't worry." Emily took my hand. Her warmth eased the ache a little. "Look, Chris, I know how tough your childhood was. You told me about the orphanage, about being sent back. But you're not there anymore. You're strong. You're a doctor, for God's sake. You've saved hundreds of lives. You'll save Jake. But you need to talk to Evelyn. Maybe it's a misunderstanding?" "And if it's not?" My voice cracked. "What if she took the money? What if Jake knew and covered for her?" Emily sighed, her eyes full of sympathy. "Then you'll do what you have to. But don't jump to conclusions. You deserve the truth. And you know what? If it's true, I'll drive to Evelyn's myself and give her a piece of my mind." She tried to smile, but I could see her worry. I nodded, but a storm raged inside me. Emily ordered me another coffee, but I barely touched it. I couldn't shake the thought that the truth, whatever it was, would break my heart. I came home determined. Jake was in the living room watching a Bears-Packers game rerun. Max, our golden retriever, lounged at his feet, lazily wagging his tail. An empty beer can and a plate of half-eaten chips sat on the coffee table. Jake looked tired, dark circles under his eyes. I noticed him wince as he shifted on the couch. I stood in front of him, arms crossed. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady, though I was burning inside. He set his phone down and looked at me. His brown eyes held worry, but he masked it with his usual grin. "What's up, Chris?" he asked, rubbing his neck, a telltale sign of nerves. "Where'd your mom get the money for a cruise?" I locked eyes with him, giving no room to dodge. "Tell me the truth, Jake." He hesitated, fingers fidgeting with his t-shirt hem. I knew that look. He always did that when he lied. She said she saved up. I didn't ask for details," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "Saved up? On her pension?" My voice rose, anger boiling over. "Jake, don't lie to me! You know where that money came from!" He sighed, set his phone aside, and met my eyes. They were tired, but there was guilt in them too. "Chris, She said it was her savings. I don't know the details," he said, rubbing his temples. "You don't know?" I was almost shouting, tears stinging my eyes. "That was my money, Jake! My $38,000, saved for 2 years! For you! For your surgery!" His face went white. He opened his mouth but couldn't speak. I saw him processing my words, but I couldn't stop. Years of hurt, fear, and loneliness erupted like lava. "I gave up everything!" I yelled, tears streaming down my face. "No new clothes, no restaurants, no vacations. I worked overtime while you slept, just to save that money. I got up at 5 a.m. for extra shifts while you watched your stupid games. And your mom? She just took it and left to plan her cruise. And you said nothing? You knew and said nothing? Christina, I didn't know. He jumped up from the couch but clutched his chest, his face twisting in pain. His breathing turned ragged. I froze, my doctor's instincts kicking in. I wanted to rush to him, check his pulse, but my anger chained me in place. You're lying, I said quieter, my voice shaking with rage. You and your mom, you're in on it. I'm an outsider to you, aren't I? Just like in the orphanage. Always an outsider. I turned and stormed to the bedroom, slamming the door so hard Max flinched and barked. I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow. Tears poured out, but I cried silently, as I'd learned in the orphanage. Weakness wasn't allowed there. In the dark, I heard Jake shifting on the living room couch, groaning softly in his sleep. His breathing was uneven, each sound cutting me like a knife. I knew his condition was worsening. I knew time was running out without surgery. But the money was gone. I lay there, calculating. How much longer to save again? 6 months? A year? Would I make it in time? What if it was too late? I sat in the bedroom, staring at our wedding photo on the dresser. Jake and I were smiling, holding hands under an arch of white roses. I wore a simple white dress I'd snagged at a sale, and Jake was in a navy suit that was a bit tight in the shoulders. Evelyn had planned most of the wedding, picked the venue, ordered a cake with buttercream roses, insisted on live music, a jazz quartet playing Sinatra. I was grateful but felt out of place. During our dance to The Way You Look Tonight, Evelyn approached me, her brooch sparkling under the string lights. She smiled, but her words cut deep. Orphan girls. They're always outsiders. They don't have family. Never will. I'd fled to the bathroom, locked the door, and cried, staring at my reflection. My mascara streaked, and the dress I'd chosen so carefully felt ridiculous. I thought she was right, that I'd never fit into their family. But Jake found me, knocked on the door, and said, "Chris, you're my family. I don't care what Mom or anyone else thinks." He hugged me, and his warmth, his scent of sandalwood and coffee, convinced me I wasn't alone. But now, years later, her words resurfaced, and I wondered, did he think I was an outsider too? Did he know about the money and stay silent? I stared at the photo, tears falling again. I wanted to believe Jake, but the fear of being forever an outsider was stronger. By morning, I was resolved. I'd confront Evelyn directly. I was done being the one who stayed quiet and took it. I'd tell her what I thought, then file for divorce. No more begging to be part of this family. I sat at the kitchen table with a cold coffee, dialing her number, when my phone rang. It was Sophia. "Christina! Big mess," she said, her voice shaky with panic. "I took Grandma a money envelope yesterday, but I think I grabbed the wrong one. There were 2 in Dad's room, and I picked the wrong one. Grandma called today, freaking out, saying it's not her money. There was a note about Dad's surgery." I gripped the table to keep from falling. The world spun again, but this time with relief mixed with guilt. "What do you mean? Not her money?" My voice trembled, barely audible. "She thought I was giving her money from Dad for the cruise," Sophia explained, her voice wavering. "But there was a note saying it's for surgery. Grandma's a wreck. Says she didn't know Dad was sick. She's at home, upset, canceling the trip. Keeps saying she failed to protect her son." I closed my eyes, tears welling up. So it wasn't theft, just a stupid, awful mix-up, but relief blended with guilt like bitter coffee with cream. I'd accused Evelyn without evidence. I was ready to burn everything down, our family, our marriage. I judged her through the lens of my old fears, of always being the outsider. I called Sophia back to get the full story. She was in her tiny Minneapolis apartment, and I heard her sipping coffee while her cat meowed in the background, demanding attention. "Christina, I feel awful," she said, her voice heavy with regret. I didn't even check the envelope, just grabbed one and ran to Grandma's. She was so excited, showing me the cruise brochure, talking about Jamaica, palm trees, sunsets over the ocean. Then she called this morning, almost crying, said she found your note. "What note?" I asked, my heart tightening again. It said, "For Jake. For surgery," Sophia replied. Grandma nearly fainted. She said if she'd known, she'd never have touched the money. She's blaming herself now, saying she didn't see Dad was sick. She kept repeating, "How did I miss it? I'm his mother." I sighed, guilt and relief warring inside me. Sophia continued, "You know, Christina, I always thought you were awesome. You're so strong. A doctor, saving lives, always in control. But I had no idea you were doing all this for Dad. Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't want to scare anyone," I said softly. "Jake works so hard. He'd worry, lose sleep. And Evelyn, I thought she wouldn't understand." Sophia paused, then said, "Grandma loves you, Christina. She's just old school. Takes her time to warm up. But she brags about you to her friends all the time. Says you're the best doctor in Chicago, that she's proud of you." I smiled, tears threatening again. Maybe I'd been too hard on Evelyn? Maybe I saw her as an enemy because I was scared of being rejected, like in my childhood. I dialed Evelyn, my fingers shaking. She answered on the first ring, her voice not its usual sharp or condescending self. It was tired, broken, almost shattered. "Christina, is that you?" she said, and I heard her sniffle. "I'm so sorry, honey. I thought you believed I stole your money. I can't stop thinking about it." "No, Evelyn, I'm the one who's sorry," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I didn't want to worry anyone. I was saving for Jake. He doesn't know he's sick. I wanted to handle it quietly." "Oh, Christina." She sniffled again, and I heard her blow her nose. "I've been a widow for 30 years, raised Jake and his brother alone, worked night shifts as a nurse to put food on the table. I'd come home at 6 a.m., and they'd be waiting with oatmeal they cooked on our old stove. And you know, I'm so glad my son has a wife who loves him more than life. But I'm so sorry you kept this to yourself. Why didn't you tell me?" I gripped the phone, her words breaking through the walls I'd built over years. "I was scared," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Scared you saw me as an outsider, like in the orphanage, that I'd never be part of your family. Remember what you said at the wedding? That orphan girls are always outsiders." "Oh, Christina," Evelyn nearly shouted, but there was no anger, just pain. "I was an idiot for saying that. I was scared, you understand. Jake's my son, my boy, and I was afraid he'd pick someone who wouldn't love him. I was afraid you saw me as a meddling old hag sticking my nose in your life. I was scared you hated my dinners, my adbikistije, my calls. We're both fools, honey." I laughed through my tears, and that laugh felt like freedom. For the first time in 15 years, I felt the wall between us crumble. We talked for another half hour, interrupting each other, crying, laughing. She told me how she'd pawned her mother's earrings, gold with emeralds, kept as a memory, to to fund her cruise while she was still spry enough to enjoy it. She'd dreamed of turquoise seas and cocktails under palm trees, but now she insisted the money go to Jake's treatment. "Evelyn, no," I protested. "We'll manage." "Manage?" she snorted, and I could almost see her rolling her eyes. "I worked 20 years as a nurse in a county hospital, Christina. I know what doctors make. I've seen you in that same old parka buying groceries on sale. Stop playing the lone wolf. We're family. Period." I cried again. Not the silent, hidden tears of the orphanage, but tears of relief, of hope. For the first time in years, I felt I had a family. That evening, we sat in the kitchen, me, Jake, and Evelyn. On the table was a bottle of red wine from Evelyn's cellar and a plate of her homemade chocolate chip cookies, the ones Jake loved since childhood. The scent of cocoa filled the kitchen, mixing with the rainy air from outside. Jake looked shell-shocked. He'd just learned his illness wasn't a secret. His dark hair was mussed, his eyes shining with a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. "Mom, why'd you sell the earrings?" he asked Evelyn. "Those were Grandma's. You always cherished them." "What's a memory if I lose my son?" she snapped, fixing him with a stern look. Her voice was firm, but her eyes were wet. "I wore those earrings to every family holiday, Jake. But you're my family. I won't let you go like I lost your father. And enough with the hero act. Tomorrow, you're seeing a cardiologist. Dr. Levin at Northwestern, not some free clinic hack." "We don't have enough money," Jake said quietly, staring at his hands, fingers twisting the tablecloth's edge. "We do," I said firmly, squeezing his hand. It was cold, trembling. "My savings, plus the money from the earrings. If it's not enough, we'll take a loan, or sell something else. My old laptop, or your motorcycle." "My motorcycle?" Jake's eyebrows shot up, his eyes sparking with mock outrage. "Seriously, Chris, that's my Harley. I'd sooner sell my vinyl collection." We all laughed. For the first time in ages, the laughter was real, warm like a sunny day after a long winter. Even Max, sprawled under the table, wagged his tail, sensing the shift in mood. "What about your cruise, Mom?" Jake asked Evelyn. "You were dreaming of the Caribbean. Palms, cocktails, the whole deal." Evelyn laughed, and it was the first time I heard her genuine, warm laugh. Like tinkling bells, light and infectious. "Son, are you out of your mind? What cruise when you're in trouble?" She looked at me, her eyes shining. "You know, Christina, I was thinking, after Jake's surgery, let's all go somewhere together. Lake Michigan, rent a cottage, roast marshmallows by a fire. Or Vegas, hit a couple casinos. Or Niagara Falls. I've always wanted to see that water thundering down. The point is, together. As a family." I took her hand. It was dry, warm, with the gold wedding band she hadn't taken off in 30 years. I looked at her and realized that sly smile I'd seen wasn't malicious. Evelyn was just excited about her cruise, like a kid heading to Disneyland. She didn't mean to hurt me. She just wanted to live while she still could. And now I saw her not as a rival, but an ally, a mom. "Absolutely, Evelyn. As a family," I agreed, warmth spreading through my chest. Jake's surgery day was the longest of my life. I sat in the hospital waiting room, clutching a paper coffee cup that had gone cold. My fingers tore at the cup's rim until it shredded. Evelyn sat beside me, her fingers nervously twisting a rose-embroidered handkerchief, a gift from her late husband. She looked older than usual, her face etched with wrinkles I hadn't noticed before. We barely spoke, but her presence steadied me. At one point, she took my hand and said, her voice trembling, "Christina, I know I haven't been the best mother-in-law. I was harsh, overbearing, meddled too much. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. You saved my son. I'll never forget that." I nodded, unable to speak. Tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. I stared at the clock on the wall. The hands crawled, each minute an eternity. I thought of Jake, humming Sweet Child O' Mine while making coffee, laughing when Max stole his slippers, hugging me after a rough hospital shift. I couldn't lose him. Not now, when we were finally a real family. When Dr. Levin came out and said the surgery was a success, Evelyn and I hugged and cried like schoolgirls. She held me tightly, her trembling passing to me. We stood like that for minutes, wordless, just holding on. In that moment, I knew she wasn't just my mother-in-law, she was family. A month passed. Jake saw Dr. Levin, one of Chicago's top cardiologists. The diagnosis confirmed: aortic stenosis, requiring urgent surgery. We pooled the money, my savings, the proceeds from Evelyn's pawned earrings, and a small bank loan. The surgery went well, and 2 weeks later, Jake was back on the living room couch, grumbling that I wouldn't let him eat double cheese pizza. "Chris, I'm fine now," he protested, holding a plate of vegetable salad I'd forced on him. "One slice of pizza won't kill me." "It won't, but I'm not taking chances," I said, arms crossed. Dr. Levin said no fast food for at least a month. Jake rolled his eyes but grinned. His face wasn't so pale anymore, and that mischievous spark was back in his eyes. Max, sensing the mood, nuzzled Jake's knee, begging for a carrot stick. Evelyn visited daily, bringing her famous chocolate chip cookies and soups she swore worked better than any medicine. One day she showed up with a huge pot of chicken noodle soup, its aroma so rich that even Max whined by the stove. "Old family recipe," Evelyn said, ladling soup into bowls. "My mom made it when we were sick. I made it for Jake when he caught colds in school. Remember, kiddo, how you'd fake being sick to skip math?" Jake laughed, nearly choking on his soup. "Mom, I wasn't faking. My throat really hurt." "Sure it did." Evelyn winked, and we all burst out laughing. Evelyn and I grew closer. She shared stories of her youth, dancing with Richard to Elvis at school dances, his proposal on the roof of his pickup under a Wisconsin starry sky, their dreams of travel they postponed for work and kids. I opened up about the orphanage, my fears, my dread of never finding a family. She listened, holding my hand, like the mom I never had. One evening, over tea in the kitchen, Evelyn pulled out an old photo. It showed her, young and laughing, in a floral dress, with Richard's arm around her waist. In the background was their Milwaukee home, with its white picket fence and rose bushes she still tended every summer. "You know, Christina," she said, her voice shaky with emotion, "I was always scared Jake would pick the wrong person, someone who wouldn't love him like he deserves. When you came into our family, I was wary. You were so independent, strong. I worried you'd see me as a nosy old bat, but you proved me wrong. You love him more than I could have dreamed, and I want you to know you're not an outsider. You're my daughter." I cried, hugged her, and we sat there until the tea went cold. I realized family isn't about perfection. It's about holding on through mistakes and misunderstandings, and I'd finally learned how. A month after the surgery, we hosted a family dinner. Evelyn arrived with a massive tray of lasagna, its tomato and basil aroma filling the kitchen, and a bottle of red wine from her cellar. Jake, stronger but still griping about my pizza ban, helped set the table, humming Sweet Home Chicago. Sophia flew in from Minneapolis for the weekend, bringing a slightly lopsided chocolate cake with cream and strawberries she'd baked herself. We sat around the table, laughing, swapping stories. Evelyn recalled how Jake, as a kid, tried fixing her old TV with a screwdriver and nearly started a fire. Jake countered with the time Evelyn got her Taurus stuck in snow, and he and his brother pushed it while she yelled, "Don't scratch the paint!" Sophia laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine, adding, "Remember when Grandma tried teaching me to bake her famous cookies? I burned 3 trays, and the kitchen smelled like charred sugar for a week." We roared with laughter, so loud that Max, under the table, started barking for attention. I looked at them, Jake, looking healthy again, Evelyn, smiling like she'd shed a decade, Sophia, chattering nonstop, and knew this was family. Not perfect, full of missteps and miscommunications, but real. We planned a trip to Lake Michigan, and Evelyn was already browsing cottage rentals with lake views on her ancient iPad. Jake joked about Vegas to make up for all the missed pizzas, and I was just happy they were here. "To family?" Evelyn said, raising her wine glass. Her eyes shone, her voice warm as her famous soup. "To family," Jake, Sophia, and I echoed, clinking glasses. In that moment, I knew. I wasn't an outsider anymore. I was home. Did you like the story? Write your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next interesting story. See you tomorrow.